This week's rail strikes could mark the beginning of a British summer of discontent, with other sectors, including nurses and teachers and council workers, also threatening walkouts over mostly pay.
The Transport Secretary says the unions are gunning for strikes, but say the government won't come to the negotiating table. The Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Simon Clarke, joins us now. A very good morning to you, Simon Clarke. Thank you for being on the programme. Grant Shapps has, clearly said, look, this isn't a government issue, the rail strikes. This is between an employer and its employees. But surely you can see that as a crucial service as travel is and the rail network is, especially with fuel prices going so high and people wanting to use their cars less, this has got to be partly a government issue. You can't just wipe your hands of it, can you?
And we're absolutely not wiping our hands of this. What we're saying is that the negotiations need to be conducted between the legal employers, that is to say Network Rail and the train operating companies, and their workforce, represented in this instance by the RMT. It isn't for government to be interposing ourselves directly between those two groups. What we will do is obviously try and facilitate a sensible conclusion. And we've tried to give a mandate for Network Rail and the train operators, which will allow that to happen. But we have to be really clear about what we're seeking to achieve here. We want a fair and sustainable pay deal, a good pay deal for rail workers, but one which doesn't entrench really high inflation. And we need to see reform of our railways, because let's be clear, it isn't run at the moment in a way which delivers either the efficiency that we have a right to expect or the pricing that we want either, because it is very expensive to travel by rail. We need to tackle the drivers of those problems. That means that these negotiations need to be substantive and they need to deliver real change. We're confident that can happen, and the government will do all we can to ensure a successful resolution.
How much of this strike do you believe is politically motivated?
Well, look, there's always an element of politicisation with this, and the General Secretary of the RMT has already said very unhelpfully that he won't negotiate, and I quote, with a Tory government. So that isn't very sensible. It is absolutely the case that this ought not to be a starkly political issue. We have a common interest in having a rail sector that's fit for the future. That's certainly what's in the best interest of union members, the rail workers who do work really hard to make our railways a good service for passengers. I don't dispute that.
You just said that the RMT leader has said he won't negotiate with the Tory government, but you're saying the same about them. You're saying that you won't negotiate with them.
No, we're saying that it's not our role to negotiate in the place of the employer. There is a legal employer. But the point is the unions then say, oh, well, the government won't come to the table. They wouldn't talk to us anyway, so this is a complete fallacy.
Right.
It's a false argument.
OK. How worried are you that we are drifting into not just a summer of discontent, but what amounts to the beginnings of a general strike? We're talking about these other areas, teaching, nursing, doctors, oncologists, all across the board, council workers, going on strike this summer for more pay because of inflation. You must be worried about this.
Well, I think it's an issue we need to take very clearly and calmly in terms of the individual negotiations that are underway. So just to explain to viewers what happens, there are independent pay review bodies made up of experts in their field who report back to each government department for the workforces for which they're responsible. So as you say, the teachers, the police, the firefighters, and so on. And those independent review bodies are reporting during the course of June. It's then for government departments to look at what they're recommending and respond. I really think it's important that we don't turn this into a more adversarial climate than it needs to be, because ultimately it is in everybody's interest that we keep a lid on inflation. It is very high at the moment across the Western world. This is not unique to Britain. It's absolutely true in Europe and America as well, because of the COVID disruption to supply chains and because of what Russia's done in Ukraine. But if we want to make sure that inflation is neither more severe than it needs to be, nor longer lasting than it needs to be, then we do need to be responsible about public sector and indeed private sector pay.
But ministers, I was saying at the beginning of this programme, I'm old enough to remember the 1970s, and ministers in positions like yours were saying exactly the same thing there. And this is what happens when you get what is tantamount to runaway inflation. You get the workers chasing wages, chasing inflation, it adds to inflation, and you get the spiral. And it seems to me that we haven't learned anything since the 1970s. It's as if we've dusted the script off and we've opened it on page 1979 and we're back in a summer of discontent instead of a winter of discontent. We don't seem to have learned anything about how to break this cycle between wage claims and inflation.
Well, I think that the point is that we have learned the lessons of history, and we need to show complete resolution in the way which the Callaghan government failed to in the late 1970s. We cannot have very, very high pay bidding processes, because if you do have that, then of course inflation becomes self-perpetuating. Prices will continue to rise. It's precisely because we have learned the lessons of that very difficult period, and we want to protect the public from them, that we're saying now that moderation is required, because if we do that, it's the quickest way to get inflation back under control.
So from what you're saying, from the government's point of view, when civil servants union want a 10% pay rise and £15 an hour, when teachers want potentially a 12% increase or they'll go on strike, nurses want a potential 16% increase or they may go on strike. Of course, all of these strikes are what we're talking about a general strike, about the whole country grinding to a halt. Is that what the government is prepared to face?
Well, as I say, I absolutely don't think that is necessary. I mean, I can say...
No, it's not necessary, but it may happen. It's not necessary, but these unions, all of them, are now gathering momentum, and they are all looking at the same thing, which is how do we protect our members who are facing a cost of living crisis, and they've had a pay freeze for several years, and essentially, in real terms, they've had a pay cut as inflation increases. You are, as a government, as a Tory government, facing potentially a general strike from all of these government employees. Is that what you're prepared to face?
I don't believe that is a helpful framework to talk about that at this point, because clearly we've got these independent pay review bodies that are reporting back. It is really important that people recognise that this is about taking the most sensible middle path through a really challenging global situation as we deal with the aftershocks of the pandemic and war in Europe. And there are no shortcuts to economic prosperity. There are no easy answers to how to manage inflation. What we are doing is saying there is no pay freeze. Public sector pay will absolutely go up. It's about the level at which it rises.
It's only going up at 2 or 3%, isn't it, when inflation is possibly going to get to 11%?
Well, I'm not going to prejudge the outcome of the independent pay review processes, because that's not for me to do today. What I would say, in addition to that, there is a £37 billion package of government support this year alone, worth £1,200 for the 1 in 3 UK homes on some form of means-tested benefit, and an average of £550 for the great majority of UK homes. And there's also things coming down the line like our tax cuts. So in July, national insurance will be cut by £330 for the typical worker. We are doing things in parallel to the pay question to help families.
All right, Minister, I'm afraid we're out of time, but thank you for yours this morning.